from one restaurant and $1 in gross revenue to 600 restaurants and $2 billion of revenue in 2001, Red Lobster was on top of the world. What happened to Red Lobster from 2001 until 2024 when it filed for bankruptcy? What lessons can we learn from that? Hello, everyone. Welcome to our YouTube channel, Sudden Wealth Stewardship. I'm Tommy Cloud, the president of Third Act Retirement Planning. It's a company I founded back in 2000. I'm a certified financial planner and qualified kingdom advisor, and I specialize in helping recent Christian affluents make biblically sound financial decisions. In today's video, we're going to discuss what happened to Red Lobster that led to their downfall and what we can learn from it. So let's dive in. If you like the video, consider hitting like and subscribing to our channel. So the story of Red Lobster really started in 1918 when Bill Darden, or William Darden, was born in Waycross, Georgia. At the age of 19, he founded his first restaurant called the Green Frog in Waycross, Georgia. Despite the state laws of Georgia at the time, which was 1937, Bill refused to segregate his patrons. He did what he thought the right thing was. And his restaurant, the Green Frog, was very successful. And at a very early age, he was able to invest in Howard Johnson's hotels. And that kind of set the stage. In 1963, Bill Darden purchased Gary's Duck Inn and became an owner of that restaurant with some partners. And then in 1968, in Lakeland, Florida, with his partner, Charles Woodsby, Bill Darden would found the Red Lobster Inn, which was inspired by Gary's Duck Inn, which he had owned part of since 1963. One thing to note about Bill Darden, because this really is a story about the Red Lobster, is that the later CEO of Red Lobster, Joe R. Lee, said that he'd never met anyone that touched so many people in a positive way as Bill Darden. So this sets the stage as we begin to look at Red Lobster launching its first store in 1968. So as the story goes, in 1970, General Mills would go ahead and acquire Red Lobster, who at that point, the business had grown to 5 restaurants. So it went from 1 to 5 very quickly. It was so successful. Bill knew he was on to something. He sold it to General Mills and continued to stay on with the restaurant until 1983. Then in the 1970s, by 1978, the Red Lobster had grown to 236 restaurants with $291 million in sales. And that is a testament. In 36 restaurants by 1978 with $291 million in sales. Now, in today's dollars, that would be $1.1 billion in sales. Red Lobster became the first casual dining chain to advertise on network TV. During the 70s, Red Lobster developed the first national seafood distribution system, ensuring a consistent supply of fresh seafood to its expanding network of restaurants. And during that time in 1972, Joe R. Lee would step on as CEO. And he would run the company from 1972 all the way until 1995. And we'll talk more about him later. And then also in the 70s, Red Lobster came right out of starting gate, just like they did with the Green Frog in 1937 that Bill originally founded back in Waycross, Georgia. Red Lobster had developed a reputation for being friendly and open to Black customers during the 70s. The chain was attracting working class and affluent Black diners at the time. And when many sit-down restaurants were not welcoming to Black patrons. And a lot of the reason for wanting the Black diners to come in is because Red Lobster had employed a lot of Black staff. And so it was a very unique restaurant from the very beginning in some of those areas. You heard a couple of firsts there, first national seafood chain, first restaurant to advertise on TV. Okay, so we're going through the 70s, seeing great success, increasing revenue, increasing locations. And it's important to note that Joe R. Lee, who became the CEO of Red Lobster in 1972, got his start with Red Lobster in 1967 and was one of the founding members. And he was a part of that. And he would remain on again as CEO of Red Lobster until 1995. In 1992, he was elected to be the chief financial officer of General Mills. So we also know that Joe R. Lee must have had incredible financial acumen and prudence in the way that he managed finances of a company, or General Mills would not have asked him to be their CFO. General Mills owned 100% of Red Lobster, and that's important to remember as we go forward, as we look at the different leaderships here. So by 1985, the restaurant had expanded to almost 400 locations with 834 million in sales, which would be the equivalent of 2.6 billion in sales in today's dollars. By 1985, they had 700 locations worldwide, and that's about what they had in. So Red Lobster had an amazing 70s and 80s expansion and growth and impact, and really kind of an iconic 2 decades under the leadership of Joe R. Lee. And then in 1995, General Mills would spin off and make Darden its own entity, and it did not own Darden Restaurants anymore. At the same time, Joe R. Lee would step down as CEO. Basically, we would see Red Lobster kind of peak out in gross revenue. Really, in 2001, they hit 2 billion. Now, in today's dollars, that would be 3.9 billion. However, they would continue to be profitable and service the customers. 2018 was their peak reported revenue, 2.6 billion, even up to 2018. In 2014, Darden Restaurants went ahead and sold all of Red Lobster to a private equity firm called Golden Gate Capital. So now anyone that was originally involved or anyone that had the restaurant background was kind of gone, and it's going to Golden Gate Capital now, which their plans were, they usually invested in businesses and sold them 5 or 10 years later, typically. So we now have a company that buys it in 2014. Then in 2016, Golden Gate decided they would sell 25% of the company to one of Red Lobster's shrimp suppliers. And that was called Thai Union. So they became 25% owners, and then they sold even more of a stake to them in 2020. They sold them another 24% ownership to take Thai Union, which was their shrimp supplier, a major seafood manufacturer, up to 49% ownership in the company. And really, this is where kind of was the beginning of the end, is when Golden Gate decided that they were going to divest themselves of roughly half of the company and sell it to one of the suppliers. 2024 was 700 locations. A couple things they did, they had a Lobster Fest, and they had the Cheddar Bay biscuits. And they did this in 1984, it was a Lobster Fest. And in 1988, these cheddar biscuits became one of their favorite items on the menu. And this was back when families would dine out. They would talk about food a lot more and that type of thing. So these cheddar biscuits, and it was, a lot bigger deal to dine out back in the, 80s, when people, maybe didn't have the budget to do this quite as much as they do it now. The advertising campaigns in the 1980s, they launched some very good advertising campaigns, again, with the funding and help from General Motors. They had one that was called Life on Land is Dry, Go Overboard, Seafood Differently. Seafood Differently. Pretty clever. They did other menu innovations. They started to adapt to their customers. They listened to their customers, and their customers wanted healthier options. So they introduced broiled, grilled, and steamed offerings to its menu, seafood fajitas and mesquite grilling. And they did all this in response to what their customers wanted. They also even expanded into Canada in the 80s and established about 30 locations in Canada, focusing on large urban areas like Ontario. They also focused on being environmentally sustainable and did ocean conservation during the 80s, when a lot of companies weren't doing that. And they also created an employee emergency assistance fund known as RL Cares. which of course stands for Red Lobster Cares. And this was to support employees facing financial hardship. So they would donate unused food to local food banks and home shelters, and they contributed approximately 20 million meals to those in need. So we can see many positive things that Red Lobster is doing under the leadership of Joe R. Lee. They are caring about their customers. They are caring about the world in general, the environment. They are caring about those in need outside of their business. And they're also taking care of people that are within the business, providing help for them in financial hardship situations. So despite Thai Union's promise in 2020 not to interfere with the operations of Red Lobster, in 2022, they went ahead and put top leadership into the company by electing Paul Kenny as CEO in 2022. Now, Paul Kenny was part of the Thai Union-led investor group that bought the majority stake in Red Lobster. So one of the things that Paul Kenny was known for was criticizing Red Lobster employees at meetings and making derogatory comments about them, which demoralized the staff and created a toxic environment. And this is according to CNN and economists writing every day. The other things that Kenny did was he cut two of Red Lobster's longtime shrimp suppliers who were competitors of Thai Union. So this allowed Red Lobster and forced Red Lobster to purchase more shrimp from Thai Union. So we've got the rooster in the hen house here. And this, of course, led to higher costs for shrimp for Red Lobster, which had long been a seafood restaurant that focused on all different types of seafood. And Thai Union would become Red Lobster's exclusive shrimp supplier. Now, Thai Union owned a large stake in Red Lobster, 49%. No one owned more than they did. And now they're the number one shrimp supplier to Red Lobster. Additionally, Kenny decided that they would start charging for the first time ever for side salads at Red Lobster, which infuriated the customers that were receiving the side salads for free since 1972. And then in 2022, he decided we'd start charging for them 50 years later. He also implemented the policy of leaving tails on the shrimp that was in pasta dishes. And what this did was eliminate the saute station in kitchens and, of course, saved on labor. The other thing that Kenny did that Red Lobster had never done before is to become a shrimp-centric in their promotions. Every promotion under Kenny's leadership was shrimp-centric. Of course, again, he was coming from Thai Union. Additionally, Kenny created this idea of an ultimate endless shrimp. And they started out charging 24 and then 22, then 25. It was a loser. They lost $11 million one quarter with that. And Kenny decided to make that a permanent menu item, was this endless shrimp. This endless shrimp also caused long lines of waiting. Customers had to wait longer. They couldn't get their food. Red Lobster would experience shortages in shrimp that could last days or weeks. There were multiple problems with it that affected the customer. The end user couldn't eat shrimp in what was now a shrimp-centric restaurant because there were shortages. They had to, not only did they go to this centric restaurant and order shrimp, they had to wait, and it was slower service. So really, you can see that they were shooting themselves in the foot to save this Thai Union company. And then there was an increased workload for the wait staff. Kenny also increased the number of tables that each waiter had to cover from 3 to 10. To hear that they increased this to 10 tables is mind-boggling to me. I couldn't even imagine servicing 10 tables. It just seems like a lot of these things that are being done are just death wishes, a deliberate attempt to destroy the company almost. Kenny would then appoint Tren Tapanya. He was with the Thai Union. He was the frozen seafood manager. He had no experience running restaurants, and Kenny made him the chief operations officer for Red Lobster. So those are some of the things that Kenny did following his becoming CEO in 2022. One of the most important things any of us can do when we see ourselves fail or someone else is to try to learn from it. So let's talk about a few things actually that I think might be helpful. And particularly, let's look at them from a biblical perspective. because in my opinion, the Bible is timeless truth, inerrant, infallible. Due diligence is very important. It's pointed out to in the Bible, and Proverbs 14:15 says, the simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. So this verse emphasizes the importance of careful consideration and due diligence before making decisions. Should Golden Gate have sold Red Lobster to one of their shrimp suppliers? Should Golden Gate have sold more equity to one of Red Lobster's shrimp suppliers? Should Thai Union have forced and hired Paul Kenny to be president and CEO of Red Lobster? Biblical principle number 2, quality of leadership. Proverbs 29:2 states, when the righteous increase, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people groan. The leadership from the original founding Red Lobster were from the greatest generation. And it's very clear, as we can see time and time and time again on sports teams, companies, it doesn't matter. Leadership is vitally important. And it just underscores the importance of good leadership to the success of a company or any organization. And as we look at biblical principle number 3, you want to avoid conflict of interest. Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. It's very clear that Paul Kenny was coming over from Thai Union, stuck his foot over into Red Lobster in a way so that he could use Red Lobster to make money for Thai Union, where his money was. That was his baby. Paul wanted to take care of Thai Union first, not Red Lobster. He was there to lead a company that he truly didn't love. And this verse, oddly enough, says despise. And by some of the decisions that were made during his brief tenure at Red Lobster, it would appear that he did in fact despise Red Lobster. Number 4, customer centricity. Philippians 2:4 advises, let each one of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. We went from serving blacks when it was not popular to do so, to providing free side salads, to only having waiters and waitresses provide excellent service at 3 different tables, to providing a healthy menu for the clientele in the 80s because that's what they wanted. So we go from focusing on what the clients want to not doing that. We're going from moving to a variety of seafood to shrimp. Sometimes the shrimp wasn't even at the restaurant. It would take them a long time to get their food. Not only that, the service went down because their waiters and waitresses were trying to serve 10 different tables. So we weren't focused on the customer. Once again, we were focused on the boats that were catching those shrimp over there at Thai Union. We just couldn't get our minds off Thai Union. And then finally, we go to fairness in business. Proverbs 16:11 states, honest scales and balances belong to the Lord. All the weights in the bag are of his making. So this emphasizes the principle of fairness and integrity in business, including supply chain management. Do you really want to have one of your fish suppliers, in this case shrimp, be running your restaurant? Are you able to, is that fair? Is that honest? Is it fair to waiters and waitresses who are trying to do a good job for people and care for people, ask them to wait on 10 tables rather than 3? So those are some of the lessons I think that we all can take forward. Management matters when we're investing in companies.